today's topic is all about the interview. I mean, this is quite a familiar term or the familiar thing that we all are aware about. But still, we'll see what is the theoretical aspects. So mostly we'll be dealing with the types. I mean, what are the different types of interview? You all have heard about heard about what interview is and how this interview is being conducted, because we are all been, passed to this stage, right? Almost all, everyone. So for this session, we will be dealing with what an interview is. I mean, how is this interview really happening in an organization? And most importantly, what are the different types of an interview? There are different types of an interview that different organization choose different methods or different type of an interview. So that depends upon the position that has fall vacant. Okay. So by the end of this session, you will be able to understand what is an interview, what are the objectives of an interview. Why do we conduct an interview? That is a basic objectives. Then mainly we'll be focusing on the types of an interview. There are different types of interview. We'll see one by one each in detail. And finally, what are the different process that is involved in an interview? Okay. So this interview, when you break this word, I mean, you can get an inter and view. That is, it's a face-to-face conversation. Okay, that happens between two persons. That is basically done through a face-to-face conversation, right? An interview, this is a procedure that is designed to obtain the information from a person through oral responses to oral inquiries. Nowadays, most interviews happen online, like Zoom interviews will be happening over there. But most of all, we'll be having a face-to-face conversation. That is a personal, direct interviews have been, conducted by almost all the organization, right? So this interview is a face-to-face conversation between interviewer and interviewee. So these are the two parties that is involved in an interview. Okay, so that is interviewer and interviewee, where the interviewer seeks the replies from the interviewer for choosing a potential human resource. This interview is the most critical component of the entire selection process, and this is designed to decide if an individual should be interviewed further, hired, or eliminated from consideration. So in the previous session, most of the students have already attended. We have gone through a topic known as recruitment, selection and all, right? So this recruitment selection is a part of the process, and this interview happens within this process, right? So once an organization decides to conduct a recruitment, and after there are n number of applicants are being applied for this particular position, and the next stage is selection process. So how do an organization choose a particular employee? How do an organization select a particular a candidate from n number of applicants? So that is what we have taking an interview into it. Okay, so this interview is being conducted mostly, if it's a big organization, they're almost having almost 2 or 3 rounds of interview would be there. That would be conducted by different department, mostly by the main head of the organization. Then one would be with the direct human resource department. So it depends upon the size of the organization. It depends upon the nature of the job. So that varies, right? So now in an organization or in companies, these interviews are generally conducted to test the interviewee, check their knowledge, examine their skills, their behavior, attitudes, and almost all the aspects of the individuals are being identified by the organization in this process. So like I said before, there are two parties involved. One is interviewer. So he's a person who asks the question. The second one is interviewee. So he's a person who responds to the questions being asked. Okay, so these are the two parties mainly involved in an interview. So in some of the interviews, there would be one or two, more than two per interviewer would be there. So that depends. If it's a big organization, 3 or 4 would be there to an interview a particular candidate. Okay, so that varies upon the organization. So that's it about the interview. Like I said, it is a face-to-face conversation that happens in an organization. When the organization have a position to be filled, they go for an interview. Okay. Now, what is the objectives of an interview? It helps to ascertain the accuracy of the provided facts and information about the candidate. So the organization might be receiving their resume with them. Okay, so they already have a basic details about this particular candidate, but they want to know much more. They want to know whether the details provided in the resume is correct or not. So to check the accuracy, of the fact or the information that is being provided by the candidate in their CV. So that is the main thing. They want to ascertain how accurate they are. Okay. The second one is they want to obtain more information, additional information from the candidates as required by the job. So we know that interview would be conducted mainly for the duration of 10 minutes, 15 minutes, more than 15 minutes even. Right. So the organization wants to know more and more about this particular candidate, how this candidate is, what is his behavior, what is his personality, his attitude. So how is he going to behave in this organization if at all he is selected. So the organization wants to know additional information. Okay. Then it helps in establishing the mutual relationship between the employee and the company. So the employee, they want to establish a good relationship. They want to know more about the employees. At the same time, they want to keep a good relationship between the particular candidate. It is useful for the candidate so that he comes to know more about his job, the what kind of job that he's supposed to do if at all he's selected, the more about the organization, the more about the salary he would be receiving. Right. So the candidates, when you think about the candidate's viewpoint, he want to know more about everything about the job. Okay. It helps the candidate assess his skills and know where he lacks and that places where he needs improvement, which means if at all an employee, a candidate is not selected, so there would be a reason for his rejection, right? So when the next time he go for another interview, he can just overcome, he or she, whoever, he can know the weakness, or he can really understand what was his weakness and make necessary steps to correct that at the same time. Right. So it's very important that every employees or every candidate attends more number of interviews so that he can become more and more effective. He can improve, he can improve his performance in the next interview as well. So it helps in assessing his own skills. That is, candidates' own skills can be assessed through this process. That is, through this process of interview. So this is a major objectives of interview. Now we'll see what are the different types of interview. So as of now, I have mentioned around 7 types of interview, but these are not the only types of interview. There are more and more types of interview. So the type or the nature of an interview depends upon the organization, depends upon the size of the organization, nature of the job, etc. Okay, we'll see this 7 types of interviews one by one. First one is patterned interview, or it's like a formal interview or organized interview that we see everyone. It's a very normal and the common method. The second one is unorganized interview. Third one is situational interview. Then depth interview, stress interview, group interview, and panel interview. So like this, we have almost 7 types of interview we have mentioned here. So the first one is patterned or organized interview. Now, like I said, this is a very common method. This is a very common method of interview that have been adopted by almost all the organization. Now, these interviews are pre-planned to a high degree of accuracy and precision. This is the pattern of interview that is decided in advance. The questions to be asked in an interview would be prepared in advance. They will prepare all the questions in advance in a proper standard format. What kind of information is to be sought or given, how the interview is to be conducted, how much time is to be allocated to each candidate, and how much time to be allocated for all the interview process. All these are worked out in advance. Such interviews are also called as standardized. So that name itself tells us this is something that is very formal in nature, which means this is very structured, very systematically arranged. Okay, they decide everything in advance. How many, I mean, at what place the interview should happen, how many people, how many candidates should be interviewed in a day, and how many time should be allocated for each candidate. Okay, so what are the questions to be asked to each candidate? Okay, so all the things regarding the interview, everything, each and everything would be decided in advance by the organization, which means this type of an interview have a high degree of accuracy. Okay, you can ensure high accuracy in this type of an interview. That's why it's saying that this is considered, I mean, this interview is also known as standardized interview or organized interview. Everything is neatly organized by the organization. Now, this is a common method of an interview. This is almost adopted by almost all the organization. Clear? The second one is unorganized. So that's just the opposite of the first one. This is a free-flowing conversation. Here, the interviewer already have a definite idea in his mind about the questions to be asked. So unlike organized interview, they are not going to prepare everything in advance. They are not going to prepare the questions to be asked in advance. So what they do is that generally this interview happens in a very short period. Like today, I have received a CV. So I call him for an interview for tomorrow. And I quickly call him. I mean, when he comes to an interview, I quickly just check his CV, and I keep on asking the questions that comes in my mind. So this does not follow any pattern. Okay, the questions, if he is free, if the particular HR or if the manager is free, he will arrange the interview on that particular time. And he will just quickly see all the details, and he will ask the questions, whatever that comes in his mind. Everything is on very what to say, not properly organized or properly prepared one. That's what we have to say, not a standardized one. So this does not follow a certain format. So that's why it does not have any formal rules and procedures. The interviewee need not wait even for an interview. Normally, every candidates come to an organization, they sit for a long time until they reached their slot time. Okay, so this quickly happens, and this does not have any formal rules or procedures or any format or anything like that. That is why this interview is known as an unorganized interview. Okay, now the third one is situational interview. Now, the situational interview means what? So this type of an interview where the job seekers are asked to respond to a specific situation they may face on a job. So in this kind of an interview, a situation or the problem is kept in front of an interviewee, and the interviewer asks them how they will deal with it and what will be the solution for that. Through this interview, they evaluate or how well they will manage the problems that comes in the organization, and how they will react to that problem, and how they solve that problems. Okay, so this interview is basically conducted. This is also, you can say, as a formal interview, but still the main focus would be on a practical. I mean, the interviewer would be asking a question in such a way, the situation would be kept in front of him. A situation would be asked. See, this is a situation like, how would you handle if an employee, he always comes late to an organization? So as a subordinate, I mean, as a superior or as an employer, what would be your decision? How would you react to this particular situation? Okay, so how would you decide, I mean, how you handle a person who is an employee who's very aggressive, he won't listen to any people? Okay, or how would you deal with an aggressive customer? So these would be the situation that an interviewer would be asking. How will you react? How well do you decide? What would be your decision regarding this interview? Okay, so a particular situation would be asked. I mean, that is a main focus. Okay, so the employer wants to know how he will react or respond when a particular situation happens in an interview, happens in an organization, if at all he is selected. Clear? So this type of an interview is known as a situational interview. Clear? Now, the next one is depth interview. See, that name itself tells us depth interview. This actually, it's almost a formal type of an interview where this interview portrays the interview in depth. So if an organization want to know about a particular candidate, in depth, he wanted to know everything about that particular candidate. Clear? So this method is particularly suitable for executive selection. Okay, this is involving more time and money. Why? Because depth interview means an employer would be taking in much time to conduct an interview, right? It's not like 5 or 10 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, right? So if there are 10 candidates to be interviewed, what happens? This time is being wasted, right? So you need more time, you need more money. Okay, so this depth interview is basically conducted to know, to ascertain everything about that particular candidate. Candidate means the interviewee. Okay, right from his history, his qualifications, his work experience, his personal aspects like his hobbies, interest, and everything about his personal life and all. So this type of an interview is known as depth interview. Okay, he allows the conversation to flow and it's more of a listener. So the more would be the employer or an interviewer would be much more a listener. He's not asking n number of questions and all, but he will be listening to what an interview wants to say. So this is like more a friendly approach of an interviewer towards the interview. Okay, so this is mainly conducted if an organization wants to know more and more about this particular candidate or the particular interviewee. Okay, so that is why this type of an interview is known as depth interview. Now comes the stress interview. Stress interview means this is a type of an interview. This is basically conducted for the jobs which are to be performed under a stressful conditions. Okay, stressful conditions. The objective is to make deliberate attempts to create a stressful condition for an interview, to observe how this applicant is going to react, how this applicant is going to behave under this stressful condition. So the purpose is to observe how the candidate behaves under the stressful condition, whether he or she loses his temper, whether he gets confused, whether he's fear of answering these questions and all. So this is being conducted to test the level of stress. How he would be reacting if at all this particular candidate is being selected for selected in the organization, and if this situation arises, what would be his response and what would be his reaction. So if this is now mainly conducted for the type of a job that is to be performed under that is a very stressful type of a job. Okay, so now normal interview will never work, so they will definitely go for this type of an interview. Okay, so the key to surviving the stress interview is to remain calm, keep the sense of humor, and avoid getting angry. So this is just a suggestion for the interviewee. So they want to understand what type of a job it is. So if at all this is a stressful job, he have to overcome this interview, right? So now what type of interruptions or what type of stressful conditions would be made by the side of, from the side of an organization? The common methods used to induce the stress: frequent interruptions. See, the interview is actually telling something. He's speaking something. In between, the employer or this interviewer is frequently interrupting him. Okay, so that is a one way of making him, making him in a stressful situation. The second one, keeping silent for an extended period of time. You ask n number of questions at a time. Okay, at a time you keep on asking the questions, and without getting the response you are keeping on asking the questions. This is mainly done to you wanted to irritate that particular interview and to understand how is he responding to the situation. Then making derogatory remarks about the candidate, accusing him that he is lying. See, you are not right, this answer is not right, I cannot accept it. Maybe that might be a correct answer, but you are making him understand that this is wrong. So what type of reaction can you expect from this interview? Okay, so this is mainly conducted to check the stress level of an employee or the stress level of the an interviewee. So the interviewer may try to stress the employee in several ways. This is some of the ways. So they try to interview, what to say, to stress them in number of ways. They can choose any number of methods for that, and they will see how this particular candidate overcomes this interview. Okay, so this is mainly conducted for what purposes? The objective is to make a deliberate attempt to create a stressful or a strained conditions, and the organization want to know how is he planning, I mean, how is he behaving, how is he reacting to the situation. That's the main objective. Okay, now moving on to the next type of an interview, that is a group interview. So group interview, this is, you have to mainly think about a group interview means there would be a group of persons. Now, whether it is a group of interviewer or a group of interviewee. So group interview means there would be a single interviewer. That means that only one person would be there to ask the questions. But at the same time, on the other side, I mean, how many number of interview would be there? A single interviewer would be interviewing multiple candidates at the same time. Okay, so group interview means there would be a group of interviewee attending the same interview and attending the interview at the same time. So this means multiple candidates are being interviewed at the same time, and this is often used if the company is hiring for more than one position. To be successful, group interviews must be well planned and executed. A group interview is an interview technique in which several candidates are interviewed simultaneously for the similar position. So this is rarely accepted. I mean, some exceptional cases, this is not going to work because I mean, a single interview can never focus on more than multiple candidates at the same time, right? So that is not going to work. But this is a type of an interview that can happen if there are n number of candidates applied for this particular position. So without shortlisting, they can quickly call for all the people for an interview, give them the number of questions and see how they are reacting or responding to each number of questions. Okay, so this is mainly done for the lower level jobs. So a company, if he's hiring for more than one position in a single day, so that is it. Okay, so group interview means one interviewer, a single interviewer, and a multiple interview would be there. Now, the opposite of that, there is a panel interview. Panel interview is just the opposite of group interview, which means there would be a group of interviewer, that is a panel of members, multiple members would be there to interview a single candidate. Okay, so panel interview means more than 2 or 3 people would be there to interview a single candidate. Now, this type of interview is done to minimize the risk of bad hire. Okay, so this panel might be including a number of people from different departments. Okay, maybe the head of the organization would be there, the human resource manager would be there, and somebody from the main department. If it's for the marketing department, some marketing manager would be there for an interview. Okay, so in multiple interviewers will be there, and these people would be interviewing a single candidate. So this, most likely each interviewer in the panel will be asking at least one question. They will be there on with the panel, particularly if it's for a senior position. So this type of an interview is being conducted to hire a higher position like a senior executive or senior manager post and all. Interview panel members are usually individuals who know the culture of the company and job requirements as well. Clear? So group interview, as you can see in the picture, group interview means a single interviewer would be interviewing a multiple candidates at the same time. On the other hand, panel interview, there would be a group of interviewer to ask the questions to a single candidate. Now, this group interview is mainly conducted to hire the positions which are a very, to a lower level jobs and all, like a very executive post and all. So they can quickly see there are number of posts would be there, like 50 or 60 positions are being vacant for this particular job. Okay, so there you wanted to somehow quickly finish off these interviews and all. Okay, so they can go for a group interview. So there would be a number of candidates attending the interview at the same time. But panel interview is mainly conducted for the higher level of jobs, and here there would be a number of interviewer. There would be a 3 or 4 interviewers asking the questions to a single candidate. Hope it's clear. So these are the different types of different types of interviews that is common in almost all the organization. Now it depends upon the nature of the organization, nature of the job, the size of the organization. They can decide which type of an interview they can go for. Okay, so these are the types of an interview. Now let's see how these interviews take place. What are the process? What are the stages involved in an interview? So we'll start with the first stage, that is a preparation. Planning is very essential, right? You have to plan everything in advance. So that's a basic function of the management. Like we have seen in the previous sessions and all, we have seen there are 5 functions of management. Okay, starts with the planning, organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling. Like that, for every process, like for every recruitment, whether it be a recruitment, whether it be a selection, whether it be anything, irrespective of the nature you are going for, there must be a proper planning. Okay, so the first thing is preparation of planning should be there. Then the setting, how you set the job, how you set the interview, at what place it should be. The third one, the conduct of an interview. That is, interviews are really taking place in this interview, this stage. Then how will you close this interview and the evaluation. So we'll see the one by one. Preparation of an interview. Advanced preparation for every interview is very essential. That is the most important part that have to be done from the side of an organization. They have to prepare everything in advance. What type of preparations are to be made? You determine the objectives. Why are we conducting this interview? What is the purpose of this interview? That have to be mentioned. Okay, so determine the objectives. Afford an interviewer an opportunity to judge an applicant's qualification. Right, so applicant's qualification, what qualification is the what is the qualification of the this particular applicant? So an interviewer should be given an opportunity to understand each and everything. Now who is going to be who is going to conduct this interview? Who would be an interviewer in this particular situation? Okay, so you have to give all the details and all the informations to the interviewer in advance. Okay, give the applicant essential facts about the job and the company. So the organization, they have to they have to provide all the necessary informations to the interviewee in advance. Then determine which method. So like we said, we have gone through almost 7 types of interview. The organization have to decide which type of an interview they are going to conduct. Which method of an interview are they going to conduct? Okay, gain maximum information about the candidates. Determine the number of interviewers. You have to decide how many number of interviewers should be there in the panel. Okay, so that these are the some of the things that have to be taken care from the side of an organization before you start an interview. Okay, then the next one is physical setting. At what place that you are going to conduct the interview? The place of an interview, the venue is very important. Sorry. The physical setting should be both private and comfortable. So you make sure that the place you set for an interview is a very comfortable place for both the interviewer and the interview. There must be a proper ventilation. There must be a proper lighting. The frequent interruptions, calls, noises from the outside, that have to be completely avoided. You should never interrupt the interview at any cost. Okay, so properly arranged seating accommodations also should be made. Sometimes a cup of tea is also offered when he or she is waiting for the purpose. Okay, so these are the things that you have to take care of when you before you conduct an interview. At what I mean, which place you are going to set for an interview, which room are you going to set. Make sure that this particular place is properly, the proper lighting is there, proper he's that both the people, that an interviewer and the interview should be comfortable from for the interviews and all. Make sure that there should not happen at any time any sort of interruptions, any sort of noise from the outside should not disrupt this interview. Okay, so this is the second stage, that is physical setting. Now the third one is conduct of interview. The interviews should take much care in the process of conducting interview. Establish a rapport with the candidate, which means you have to establish a good communication, a good relationship with the candidate. Get maximum information from the applicant. Normally before an interview in some of the organization, they would be giving a set of paper, set of application form would be there, and the interview, these candidates would be asked to fill this form. Okay, and before they get to an interview, before they go for an interview, the interviewer can quickly see what they have responded to these type of questions. So getting the maximum information from the applicants is very essential. So some organizations prefer that. Recording of information by means of notes, records, or observation are also necessary. So it depends where the organization can decide to make a record of each and everything. Okay, so this is a stage where an interview actually takes place. Now the fourth stage is close of interview. Now how should we close the interview? How should you come come to an end? The interview should always end with the same pleasantness in which it began, without creating any awkward or embarrassing situations for the interview. So once you start, you were very happy, you have invited the interview to the step, to this particular place, and you asked him the introductory parts and all, every questions have been asked. And at the end of an interview, make sure that the interviewer is at the same place. He keeps the same pleasantness in him. You should not make the interview very very conscious or very anxious about certain things and all. If the interviewer is feeling that yes, the interviewer might not be happy with me, that should not happen at any cost. Okay, so avoid creating any awkward situations. Candidates should be asked whether he would like to say anything on any point concerning the job and interview. So that is every interviewer would be asking, like, if you want to ask anything, you can definitely go for that. If you want to know more about this job, or if you want to know more about this company, the company's working hours, the working time, the number of days, everything. So if at all any questions are running in the mind of the interview, so the interviewer can take initiative to ask such questions. Okay, so make him comfortable for sitting in the interview, and make sure that the interviewee always have every information that you want to communicate. Okay, inform him about everything. Desirable applications are generally told when they are likely to hear further about their acceptability and arrangement for medical examination. So say for example, if n number of candidates, like 100 or 200 candidates are being interviewed for about in a week. Okay, so it's not practically possible to give feedbacks to these applicants who have come for an interview, right? So most probably every organization, what they do is that they will generally call the students or the applicants who have been selected for the further rounds, right? So what they have to do is that try to give a rejection letter, or try to give a letter or the email, through email, every information to all the applicants who have come for an interview. Okay, that is like a standard way of doing everything. Okay, so desirable applications are generally told when they're likely to be heard in the near future. Sometimes they would be called for the other sessions and all. Sorry. So this is the stage of close of interview. Now the last stage is evaluation. This type of evaluation have to be conducted immediately after the interview. So there must be a 10 or 12 candidates coming for an interview. So each candidate, when they step out of the place, what the organization have to do, evaluate that particular candidate. You make a record of this particular candidate's weakness, their strength, everything. What marks or what grade can you provide this candidate? Okay. So the strength and weakness of candidate is analyzed properly. This evaluation can be done either by grades or points at the same time. Okay, so these are the different sorry. So these are the different process that is being involved in an interview. The process is like, first one is like the preparation. Just a second. Preparation of an interview, how you plan the interviews, how you prepare for an interview, then the physical setting, then the conduct, the proper interview that takes place, conduct of an interview, then the close of interview, and finally the evaluation process. Clear? So that is it. So we have already covered what an interview is, what are the what are the different objectives, for what purposes are we really conducting the interview. And then we have mainly gone through almost 7 types of interviews, right? So what are the different types of interview? We have gone through each and every type of interviews in detail. And then, like, what is the process, real process that is taking place in an interview? Mainly we dealt with the preparation stage, that you have to plan everything in advance. Then what must be the proper place, then how you conduct the interview, how would you close the interview, and how would you evaluate that particular candidate. Clear? Then we'll just see what were the types of interview. Okay, so we started with the first type. It was an organized interview, which is seen as a very structured form, very patterned form and all. So everything is being prepared in advance. There would be a standard rules and regulations for the same. And the next one is free flowing conversation, which is just the opposite of structured interview. Okay, so this does not have any certain format and all. Then the situational interview. Here, a situation or the problem is kept in front of the interview, and an interviewer would be asking, how are you going to deal with? How would you give? What type of solutions can you come up for this situation? Okay, so generally a situation. So how would you deal? This might be, as for example, how would you deal with an aggressive customer? He's keeping on contacting you, but you don't have anything to say. So how would you deal with this sort of customers? How would you deal with an employee who's always late to an organization? Okay, he's not even responding to the employees and all. He's not listening to these superiors and all. So how would you react in this situation? Okay. Depth interview. Depth interview is mostly conducted to understand more and more about the particular candidate. Stress interview is mainly conducted to understand whether they are being how an employee or how the job would be performed under a stressful conditions. And then, like, it's group interview and the panel interview, like we said before. Okay, so you people have any doubts for the doubts in the session?